5701. Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's keep rolling. What do you got?
All right. So in Canada, as of last week, a visitor is no longer able to apply for a work permit.
Whoops.
And a global news article lays it out. And the article mentions that concerns about abuse has caused the government to move forward and tighten up the rules. This whole thing, I'll be honest, I didn't even know it existed that a visitor was able to apply for a work permit. I didn't realize that was a thing, but it was introduced back in August of 2020. It was a response to the pandemic. And why was it introduced then? Makes sense, is that people that were here in Canada as visitors and they couldn't have gone back because everything was shut down, they gave them an opportunity at least to earn some money and to sustain themselves rather than just becoming homeless or being a leech on their family or whatever. So that made sense, but it's now been 4 years plus that it's been in place. Originally, this whole ordeal was supposed to expire in February 28, 2025, but the government decided to accelerate it to August 28, 2024. So now that is no longer the case for visitors to apply for work permits in Canada. As per IRCC, that's Immigration, Refugees, Citizenship Canada, that's the department that oversees this, they say overall efforts to recalibrate the number of temporary residents in Canada and preserve the integrity of the immigration system was the reason why they went ahead and made this change. And the number of temporary foreign worker positions in Canada, and I thought it would be higher than this, but apparently has more than doubled since 2016.
Yeah.
I thought it would have been much higher than that, but it's been 2x since 2016. This is according to ESDC. And the government is also doing a whole bunch of other measures too to try to mitigate the pressures that's being imposed by foreign workers. Starting September 26th, we talked about this, I think last week or week before, that the government is going to start refusing applications for low-wage temporary foreign workers in regions that have unemployment rates of 6% or higher. And there's also for employers, there's going to be a cap of 10% of employees coming from low-wage stream of the temporary foreign workers program, and a reduction of the maximum duration of employment from 2 years to 1. So you can no longer get a 2-year work permit. It's going to be a 1-year thing. So meanwhile, they're also putting a cap at international students. That's going to take place in January, and it's expected to result in a 35% drop in enrollment compared to 2024. So there are measures they're going ahead with reducing the amount of foreign workers. They see this is a issue.
It's a political issue. They don't care about anything else.
Absolutely is.
Issue. Yeah,
absolutely is. And in fact, we'll talk about the results from this moving forward. But yeah, I'm not sure if you want to add any
two things. Yeah, two things. Vashi Kapelos, my media wife, my media crush. We're not married in the media, but she's been my favorite for a long time. Grilled Mark Miller in what probably he thought was going to be a quick 2 or 3 questions, and ended up being about 11 minutes of fire from her. And a lot of pointed commentary from her about how they either didn't care, didn't see, or ignored anyone who claimed this was going to be a problem. She also called him out for saying that a year ago they said anyone who mentioned this was racist and dismissed it. Good for her. You like to see that from the media. Interesting stat here. We talk a lot about LMIA jobs. We talk a lot about TFWs. Have you heard about the IMP program?
No.
In Canada, we have something called the International Mobility Program, and it's another way to get work permits. In 2020, we'll say 2010. In 2010, since that's what the tweet says, in 2010, we let in about 9,000 people from India into this program and had just under 200,000 people total. In 2023, that number went to 355,000 Indians and more than 1.1 million total people in a year. That's separate, I think, from the temporary foreign worker program, and certainly separate from the student program. So there's a lot of card shuffling and shell games, I think, with these numbers, where the overflow is coming from, who is really the overflow, what countries are over contributing to the overflow, and how difficult is it going to be to really find all these people and put them back on planes or boats to their country of origin, now that we've seemingly decided this is the only way forward. I shouldn't say we've decided this, actually. The other thing I want to mention on that note is I am concerned that what I hear is actually not that we need to remove these people from the country once their foreign workers permits are done. What I actually hear is we need to make sure they're not foreign workers in the country. And what does that mean, Len? It means either they go home or what's the alternative?
Well, they could stay here in one way, shape, or another.
They
Either
become
they may,
citizens. They become
well,
citizens, right?
eventually.
Yeah.
So
They
either to maybe
get put on
claim,
a pathway. Yeah.
yeah, either
So
claim asylum, or if they
yeah,
marry somebody here and get sponsored or something.
it's very unlikely that we will ever go back to pre-pandemic numbers in terms of I guess in terms of immigration or growth or whatever, because I think there's probably a fair chance that most of these people stay in the country. I should note that not all these people should go back. Some of these people are contributing at a pretty good clip to the economy, I'm sure, and are, upfront about their status and things of this nature. But when I see protests in Brampton, for example, from a bunch of international students who are in their mid 40s talking about how I have to fix my system and not send them back, sending you back is part of fixing the system, number one. And number two, the system is overloaded now because of the problems. And it's not a problem that's a personal problem with the people who are here. It's just that the people that are here are a symptom of these issues over the last few years, and we have to reconcile the issue somehow. The system has to be remedied. Part of that is potentially making sure that people go back home when their permits are finished or when their studies are finished or whatever. So that's interesting. The other thing I think maybe we should mention is that, again, like, this is an overtly and like very clearly political issue now. Everyone is talking about this. Every newspaper is publishing stories about immigration. The broader Canadian view of immigration, and maybe more importantly, and maybe more detrimentally, the view of immigrants has completely shifted, fairly or unfairly. That's not good for the country. And the Bank of Canada put out that research a little while ago that we talked about on the show, where the number of immigrants who have jobs after 5 years or 10 years is pretty low. The age of immigrants coming over means they can't contribute meaningfully to things like CBP, healthcare, infrastructure through taxes and whatnot, but they are using those services. And of course, when you come over in numbers that great, all to the same, let's say 8 cities in the country, you overload all those systems: healthcare, education, roadways, sewage, plumbing, housing, you name it. And you're seeing the repercussions of that now. So yeah, this problem is for sure in need of an overhaul, a fix. But isn't the question, Len, not one of whether it needs the overhaul, but rather one of how are we going to execute the overhaul? Like, I don't care which party's in power. It's going to be so difficult to fix some of these problems now. It's the resources required, for example, to
Yes.
track and trace, not
Yes.
to use a term that'll give you PTSD, but track and trace people who are here illegally or will be here illegally at some point. But what's the plan? There's no plan for that. It's going to be damn near impossible to get that done. So something to keep an eye on as always. But I do not envy whoever winds up with that task, over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever.
We'll see what happens. I don't even want to guess what. Let's talk about this as a piggyback to the previous story I just talked about. And I'm not sure if did you read this Toronto Star article about
Which
the
one?
investigation about temporary foreign worker program? They did an investigation into it. This is pretty damning stuff for the Toronto Star. They said that government officers were.
I did see this. The fast tracking, right?
Yeah. So government officers were told to skip fraud protection steps when vetting temporary foreign worker applications. This is according to the Toronto Star investigation. And beginning of January 2022, ESDC allegedly told people processing applications to apply quote unquote streamlined measures. And this was going to be for evaluating the legitimacy of applications for employers who want to hire temporary foreign workers. So there may have been potential misuse by fake employers to lure people here. Let's be honest, there may be some people that did this as a way to get into Canada, but there may be also people that came here thinking that there would be a job waiting for them. And when they came here, there's no job to be had. So they got duped. And now they spent all this time and money to uproot themselves to a different country. And here they are, and there's no fucking job. So the this is all from this investigation. I have no way to confirm this is true or not. But the Toronto Star, for them to come out with this, and it's a very damning investigation. I suspect that they must have put in a lot of time and effort into vetting everything to make sure everything was correct. And they came out with this. I suggest people read into this. It's very interesting stuff. I don't know if they have since ESDC has changed their stance and gone back to the old way of doing things where they vet things the old-fashioned way.
Who knows?
But that's, I don't think it was mentioned in the
I mean,
article.
don't forget, we just had a guy try to plan a mass casualty event on Canadian soil like a month ago. And the only reason we found him is because France turned us on to it. Like, we didn't vet this guy when he came in 5-6 years ago, under whatever program, asylum, employment, or otherwise, even though he was in an ISIS video from like the year before. So like this, it's not just about vetting to make sure people are like, you know, culturally aligned, right? It's stuff like, will this person bomb Nathan Phillips Square during the Santa Claus parade? Yes or no? There's no question like that on the immigration form. You have to find out yourself. And if you're fast tracking, you don't find out.
Yes, they do. I mean, to come to Canada when you claim asylum, they do some background checks on you. They do what they can. Let's be honest. If you're coming from a war-torn country, so if you're accepting individuals from a country that is war-torn, there's not much information you could go, and you can't go to the local police and ask them, please give me that person's record. There is no police station to be had.
No,
you can't go to the
yeah.
So that's the thing. So when you're dealing with this, you're kind of, unfortunately, there may be stuff that slips through the cracks. And I'm not trying to justify this. It's just a reality of it. Just information is not easily available, freely available, and yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
comment section inflammatory at this moment. So
yeah, you know, so I'm just trying to, in terms of like that individual that came here, the alleged ISIS guy, I'm just trying to give some not justification, but reality of it. It's just it's impossible to do a thorough background check on everybody.
That's fair. That's fair. So, I get frustrated because it seems to me more and more as we see more reporting and more digging and more investigating, this was avoidable, you know, like these problems were avoidable. And I think people who talked about how we needed to avoid them were unfairly villainized, not just by the sort of powers that be, but by the government and by the newspapers and by their friends and by their families. And, you know, that wasn't a fair response, because now the admission is basically that, yeah, you were right 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and now we have to do something about it. But the situation is so dire that, you know, again, there's going to be, I predict it'll either be an undershoot or a massive overshoot. But, you know, the difficulty in getting something like this right, you know, and like hitting the Goldilocks zone, it's, in the best of times, it's difficult. But now it's going to be almost impossible, you know, and it sucks.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you saw this picture or a video that was floating around Twitter. It was in Kitchener, Ontario, and there was a new Longo's. It's a grocery store chain in Ontario and maybe Canada. They were hiring.
They have one in Hamilton. You never been to Longo's?
I've been to, yeah. I've been.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
So I just don't know if it's in the rest of Canada for people listening in here or watching. So new Longo's, they're hiring. Somebody took a picture or a video of this. 500 people lined up for these entry-level jobs. And you can imagine I'm
afraid to ask.
So, yeah. I mean, you can fill in the blank. And so there you go. And this just, we've talked about these stories over and over again. They're frequent. And every time something comes up, there's people, they need job, they need money. And it's always, they just line up and away you go. It's too bad.
Should people be boycotting anyone that hires TFWs or uses LMIAs at this point? Like,
there'd be almost nowhere to go. I think
there's a few places to go. It'd be very difficult for sure, but like you could do the easy ones, like Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Fortino's, No Frills, Starbucks, Pizza, Subway, Pita Pit, all the sort of like, you know, stock favorites. Just don't go.
Yeah, if it's franchised, you expect them to have
just don't go before. Anywhere you see it, just don't go.
Except for Tahini's, I would suggest go there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Al uses TFWs. So I'll have to ask him, but I don't know what else to do at this point, right? What are we supposed to do?
I'm at a loss. I don't know. It's just
Because
almost
you're not really allowed. You're still not really allowed to talk about it that much. You kind of are. You kind of aren't. People still have a hard time expressing their opinions about why this is a bad idea because they don't know that much about it. Hell, even you and me, like, we talk about this stuff pretty often. There's still gaps in my understanding for all this stuff. But at some point, like, you have to boycott these businesses. Unemployment for under 25s in Ontario was what, 14% over the summertime, right? It's too high. It's just plain old too high. And the reason it's too high is because temporary foreign workers and international students, that big time quotation marks around that second one, are taking jobs. And to hear the students talk about how any restriction on the hours they work will make living here very difficult, too fucking bad. The whole program was supposed to be centered around you proving you had the funds to study here without working. If you don't have the funds, go back, pick a cheaper school, whatever. But don't complain, man. There's, this whole they took our gerbs thing from South Park. Like, yeah, it's a bit of a meme, but you're kind of encroaching on that territory now, I think. And the sort of the common pushback is, well, Canadians don't want those jobs. They sure as shit do. They sure as shit do. I know enough young people that are having trouble finding decent jobs at an entry level these days, thanks to my time coaching, that I can tell you that I'm pretty sure Canadians would fill those jobs if they were given the opportunity. But the powers that be, and I'm not talking about the government here, I'm talking about, the Loblaws types, are so hell bent on wage suppression that they're just going to push and push and push to try and get as many TFWs, LMIAs, foreign students, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Metro in the chat saying they want to be paid a living wage. I think that's fair, man. I do think it's fair. Like we talk about all the time, inflation has gone crazy over the last 3 years. There's only one group of people pretending it hasn't, and that group of people happens to be aligned with the folks who want to suppress wages. Like, it's possible that Loblaws is not gouging you while also suppressing the wages, right? Like, they can be falsely accused on one hand and actually guilty of this other thing on the other hand. That's I think it's fair. And I am so worried for the next generation, because it's like the next generation had all kinds of problems before this, right? These guys are getting prescribed meds because they want to play Xbox instead of learning long division. They're constantly getting berated by TikTok algos and Instagram algos and screen time. And, it's dangerous to go outside now more than it was a year ago. There's open drugs, rampant addiction, rampant theft, rampant crime. Even here in Hamilton, there's a shootout near Limeridge Mall yesterday or 2 days ago, a shootout on the street. Kids have enough trouble without not being able to find work experience. When you add that to the pie, just to tie a bow on this, the pension and Social Security Ponzi here relies on those kids being able to support the population with decent paying jobs. And if you don't give them a chance to learn, then you're really setting that Ponzi up for failure more than it's already destined to that outcome anyway. And I just think it's so short-sighted, man. So short-sighted. But this is what politics yields all the time. And you're seeing this everywhere now. It's not just here. We talk about it here because we live here, but it's everywhere now. The States is mimicking policies that are so fucking bad over here, even though we have 10 years or 15 years of experience with shit like the first-time homebuyer supports and like proposals on new taxes for unrealized gains and higher capital capture tax. Like, it's not like there's no evidence of these things working anywhere, and yet they're being tried. Why? Because they just need short-term gains at the ballots and the polls, whatever, right? And it's going to cost people big time. This is why, if you don't have Bitcoin, man, like, I don't know what the fuck you're thinking. I don't know what you're thinking. I have no idea. You're all that other stuff is like, it's TFSAs, RSPs. Yeah. For now. But at some point, Len, like you say this all the time, right? Like, you're playing a dangerous game investing in those vehicles still, You're really asking for trouble. And it used to be 20 years away.
In front of
I know. It used to be 20 years away, and now it's like fucking 5.
It could be. I mean, yeah. I could be totally wrong, and it could be like,
I don't think you're wrong. No.
And yeah. We talked about a number of stories, including a lot of the measures the government is trying to do to curb a lot of temporary foreign workers and even students. There was a recent poll that came out this past week. Not sure if you saw this, but the Liberals are experiencing a jump in all this.
Surprise.
At the expense of whom? The NDP.
Yeah.
So now the Liberals are clearly in second place. Before, the Bloc was kind of in there. Now they're pushed to third. The Liberals, not going to say that they're making a comeback here, but look, they have a year left, a year and change left before the next election. Who knows what's going to happen? The economy could change, could improve drastically. Rates are probably going to come down. There's going to be a whole bunch of things that are going to be done. At the request of government, some is just going to be naturally occurring just because the global economy does its thing.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what's going to happen? There may be a little bit of a comeback here where they could push things into a point where the Conservatives may still win, but it would be a minority government. And then there's possibilities.
This should be everyone's base case. I would not. I said this on the Carrazza show last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was. I would not bet against the Liberals in any election, whether they had the election now or in 11 months. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't bet against them.
Well, only two parties have ever governed in Canada. So you're either going to be talking, and I'm not. There may have been a PC party one time, but that thing just merged into what we have today.
Left or right. Yeah.
You only have the red and the blues. Yeah. That's the only two that govern in Canada. So if it's not going to be one, it's going to be the other. So yeah, I mean, the Liberals certainly have a chance.
Yeah,
history has proven that.
Yeah.
And this poll, I'm not saying this is trending. It's going to maintain this trend moving forward. But like if things continue where they are, and they can show that they're trying to get rid of some things that are impacting people negatively, people are gonna look at that positively and maybe say, you know what, let's keep him for another few months, few years.
Yeah.
And if he gets enough,
it's possible.
Could be a minority coalition.
Boomers in the chat saying something that I want to address, that if Harris wins, the Liberals will win. If Trump wins, we get Pierre. I actually view it the opposite way. I think if Trump wins, it will be a bump for the Liberals. They've done, I think, a pretty good job equating Pierre with Trump among the normie crowd. I have some family who is completely wrapped up in mainstream media, legacy media nonsense, and views Trump and Pierre the same way. People will say things at family gatherings like, if Pierre wins, I'll lose my reproductive rights. Like, clearly not true, clearly actually insane to say, but it's just what CBC says or CTV says. And so this is what they parrot, because in the States, what is the line? Trump will have a nationwide ban on abortion, even though the man has said at least 500 times in the last 3 months that he's not going to ban anything. The states can decide. And if you don't like the outcome there, you can move to another state. This is how it should be, probably. You're going to start seeing the same thing here in Canada, by the way, with a formerly untouchable program in healthcare. Provinces will start to experiment with different healthcare things. The Overton window on healthcare is shifting, as I mentioned on Twitter yesterday. I want to talk to someone on the show about that. But yeah, I think actually Trump will yield a Trudeau boost. And if Harris wins, I think you will actually see a Pierre boost over here. Sort of inverse of what you might expect, or what might be the American political outcome. I think people don't know. It's so bad to say this, but I think a lot of people just don't know what they're voting for, honestly. And so when people make fun of Harris for trying to run on vibes, I just am like, what else do you think most people vote on? They get to the ballot box, and I bet you that, some percentage of the population votes based on what they feel like that day, or some event that happened to them in the last 12 hours, which party they think can help them with something that affected them 12 hours ago. That's just how people are. I don't know. I think that's true. I think that's true. I don't know if it's a big population, Len, but even if it's 5%,
that's it. That's what I was going to get at. So
that's enough to cause a fucking problem.
In the U.S. of the people that vote, you'll have your 35 to 40% that is going to be hardcore one, and 35 to 40% is going to be
they're never moving.
The other.
Yeah, they're never moving. Yeah,
and it's just that middle, that whatever is left, that's going to be enough.
Yeah. The 9 swing states, right, or 10 swing states. That's always the case. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So those are the people
made, by the way, that you want your population. I mean, there's two ways to look at this, right? That population is fickle and easily influenced, and so you don't want to be ruled by them. But the other side of that coin is that population is considerate and changes based on issues and based on the state of affairs, election cycle to election cycle. And so you do want to be governed by them, as opposed to these people who never leave their camps. Now, I've made the case before that I think the left has a much stronger and more consistent base thanks to the handout policies. than the right does. But I mean, we'll see. All this stuff is it's fluid to say the least, and it's more polarizing than ever before. The difference between this election and 2020 and 2016 is that a lot of people were afraid to say certain things because they were afraid of the repercussions socially, professionally, whatever. Now I think that ship has basically sailed in the US. And I think by the time the election comes here, it will have sailed in Canada as well. And so that's the sort of exciting thing, is that people will be mask off and gloves off during election seasons in a way they haven't been in about a decade.
Did you see this video for crack pipes? You could get outside the Nanaimo.
Yeah, you just zip up to the vending machine there. Yeah, it's like a Best Buy. It's like the machine you buy headphones from at the airport.
It's incredible that they have that, like at the hospital where they treat. And in the background, you hear kids playing at a nearby playground. Yeah. It doesn't seem like it's.
There's like houses across the street. It's like how it looks like housing across the street. Like,
yeah, not to say that there is a proper setting for it, but if there is a place where it shouldn't be, I guess this would be one. You've talked quite a bit about these type of things. I know BC is kind of the forefront of dealing with these types of.
It's the forefront of lunacy and piss poor policy for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have nothing to say. I just
there's nothing to say. And so in typical Joey fashion, I will say there's nothing to say and then talk for 10 minutes. This is a shit policy idea. These machines, if you want to see people reducing their harm in the street and just like, there's great videos of people just flicking fucking syringes onto the road, getting too close to children and families and stuff in neighborhoods that used to be safe. There's tons of evidence that these people are dangerous when they're high and even more dangerous when they're looking to get high. There was just a guy killed on the link here in Hamilton over the weekend in the middle of the night because he walked onto the freeway, probably high or some mix of searching and coming down. Like these things are, they're unfortunate to be sure. But again, my beef is that they're avoidable and that there's a lot of data that shows that harm reduction doesn't work if it's the last stop on your continuum. Harm reduction has to be a stop before total abstinence, total removal of these things from your life. And the removal of these things from your life requires effort, requires discipline, requires community, and requires continuity. And you don't get any of those things if you're just grabbing supplies from the vending machine. Maybe the most telling part of that article, remember what they couldn't get out of the machine because there was none left? Crack pipes. Oh, yeah. So they got the cocaine kit. They wanted the crack pipe kit, but there was none left.
Do you remember that guy that set up a stand and I think he was selling meth? Was he selling it? It was in
I remember
BC.
that. I remember that.
He ended up passing away.
He died. Yeah.
But that guy was a true entrepreneur. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He would have been a good interview, I think.
Yeah. She would have been a good Jesus Christ.
Well, it would have been awesome to talk
if there's an appetite for it, we talk about addictions a lot. If people want to talk about it, I would ask Regan, who's the CEO of Wayside House, to come on and talk about harm reduction and abstinence and what we do at Wayside and, his history with addiction services and the sort of ins and outs and dealing with the provincial healthcare systems and some of the bureaucratic wins, some of the bureaucratic losses in terms of the sort of fortress that the province and the Fed have put up around these services. There's a lot of good going on, but it's hard to pivot the ship. And there's just so many loud voices and so much money behind harm reduction. It's scary. And I would love to talk to him on this show. If you guys wanted to hear from him, that is like, I won't bring on a guest unless it's something that's, at least reasonably on brand for us. But it feels like we talk about this so often and it's usually just my voice you hear. It might be worth hearing a guy who's, not just professional. I would say he's one of the foremost experts in the country on this stuff and on the outcomes and the data and what the data shows.
There's a CTV article that's was published last week. It was a doozy, Joey. It's the title was "More Humid Than Usual. It Might Be the Corn," and they're not talking about Bitcoin.
Oh my god!
So apparently, higher humidity is a result from crops. Environment and Climate Change Canada senior climatologist David Phillips says that
When did we start that name change, by the way? Used to be Environment Canada. Now it's Environment and Climate Change Canada. When did that happen? I feel like I should know that, but I don't remember that happening. Did it? It must have. I don't remember when it happened.
Well, they threw it an extra C. And so apparently evapotranspiration or crop sweat is a major contributor to rising humidity levels, and that could fuel more extreme weather. And crop moisture doesn't make the air feel stickier. It could also fuel extreme weather events. Phillips explains that the additional humidity could act as a fuel for thunderstorms, causing them to become supersized and more destructive, all because of crops. And he says this could include hail, strong winds, and other types of weather. He says that crops do create weather, and often it just augments or adds to whatever is the current situation. And so it can make it worse, it can energize that storm, it can push it into the atmosphere. And it creates a situation where moisture condenses, it releases energy or energy storm, and the storm gets wilder. Remember, corn in the United States is subsidized quite a bit. I'm not sure about the same in Canada. It may be the case, but it's kind of ironic in a way that we have something that is subsidized that now may be a contributor to what they say is climate change. Like what the fuck? Like corn, man, not Bitcoin, but fucking corn is causing climate change.
Spin the wheel, man. Russia, climate change, whatever it is, corn. I had some delicious local corn with my dinner. Actually, it was very good. I can't remember where.
Did it feel more humid as you're eating it? By the way, could you just?
Corn, I don't know if it was just sweating because it knew it was going to be eaten, but it was sweating a little more than normal. So humid in the house, the windows are fogging up. This is just so dumb. This is just so dumb. Like, what else are you gonna say about this? Like,
yeah, that's why it's for this show.
Corn sweat, Len.
For this show, it's fucking fitting. And, all right, I guess a couple more stories here. The federal government and the city of Toronto, they have partnered to protect communities from worsening floods. So they moved together to modify the Black Creek and Lavender Creek channels, and they're going to construct a new floodplain protection wall and several bridges, and there's going to hopefully make it better. So, if there's a lot of rain, it's not going to flood people's homes. They say, this is the part that I absolutely love. They say, this is according to Canada.ca, every dollar that's invested in adapting and preparing for climate-related disasters, so every dollar can return as much as $13 to $15 in return.
Is this an Elon Musk AI YouTube stream? What is it? These are better returns than Michael Saylor sending 2 ETH. Are you kidding me?
So I've done some research. Good rates of return, strong is 5%, and 10% is supposed to be very, very good. For every buck, they're getting back 13 to 15%. This blows blows the shit out of the water. So
Kathy would eat your heart out.
Talk about a money printer.
I didn't see anything in the ARC Big Ideas portfolio about floodplain investing.
That's where I'm putting all my fucking money into it, and I'm gonna make a fucking shitload. Like, this is just perfect.
So rich.
Yeah, and Olivia Chow is part of this whole.
She took a break from dancing for this. That's good. Okay,
yeah, good for her. So, yeah, nothing I gotta say about that. I just good for them. What a great return of investment.
Incredible. Why would they this? This is such a good litmus test for the whole how smart is your population? Like, how smart is your voter base? Well, not that smart, because they can't figure out that $2 returning $15 is completely
one buck is getting 15.
Completely ridiculous. Like, just
number go up.
Insane.
Fuck Bitcoin, because that store of value is blowing.
We got to get Canadian Floodplainers podcast. We're ready. Next week we're switching over. The brand is changing. I'm getting my wife on the horn right now. Start making the new graphic.
All right. Last story I think we'll talk about is CPP. I'm not sure if you follow the CPP investment board, but they plan to spend $300 million plus, up to
bonuses.
Million. No, this is for a 10-year lease that they plan to get through CIBC Square. And remember, they're there for people's pension, and they're trying to get this. Apparently, this is the most expensive office space in the country. This is according to this article. And they say this meets commercial objectives as well as attracting new talent. At a time where people aren't going 100% to the office. Downtown Toronto, they've been talking about this for some time. The business there are struggling because people are not working 5 days a week in the office. Why would the CPP invest this much money? Where does the money come from? I'm guessing from the actual pension itself, or in some way, somewhere from there. But that's a lot of money, and just try to attract new talent. I would think that new talent would prefer to work from home more than anything. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the people want to go to the office and hang out at CIBC Square. But man, it's a lot of money that they're spending here. 300 million plus. It could be 450 million all said and done. For
who owns the building now? Any idea?
CIBC Square?
I'm
guessing. I believe CIBC themselves own it, and they just lease out the. So
interesting. So they're bolstering the bank's portfolio. Presumably, they hold a significant portion of bank stock, right?
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of that.
So yeah, that's a bit of a interesting dynamic there. Someone will have to tell me whether or not that's fraudulent. Probably not fraudulent, but it's very interesting. I don't know. Like, the reason you don't want to go to work in Toronto at the office is because there's just people reducing their harm all over the place. Not to mention that the likelihood that you get run up on by a Palestinian protest is like 1 in 4 at this point. Like the pictures from the air show, guys with their families and these people with Palestinian flags just like screaming at them, just trying to watch some planes, bro.
Did you see Byward Market?
Yeah, insane. Just trying to eat my fucking lunch. Yeah.
Where did they get the smoke from?
Crazy. Absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. Oh my God. Listen, I don't know anything about that cause, but I'll tell you something right now, okay? If you're on the street with a flag or a sign, you're a loser. I don't care what your cause is. And actually, it's funny. Me and Mark were talking at lunch, and he said the same thing. Like, it's just like, if you care this much, there's better ways to focus that energy that will yield better results for you and your loved ones in your community than that. And you got to think about that when you decide to hit the streets with a smoke bomb. Just give it up.
Palestine, I'll have to give them credit. They have a higher GDP per capita than India does. Did you know that? And it's like 50% higher.
That's great. Good. Wow.
Than India. Now, keep in mind, the amount of poverty in India is driving that down. You got 1-something billion people. There's a lot of people like they're earning fuck all over there. So that's really driving that number down.
What?
But if you just look at, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to say that if you look at the GDP per capita of Palestine, it eclipses India.
Are they ahead of us? Like, our GDP per capita is going down all the time. We're 7 of 8 quarters down now, right? I'm pretty sure 7 of the last 8.
It's got to be like decades if that trend continues for this to cross. No, it's nowhere near.
Nice. We're poorer than the Rust Belt states. That's interesting, though, isn't it? So India's got a really low GDP per capita, and we're bringing over a lot of people from India. Is that good? Like, is that good for our GDP per capita? From a mathematics standpoint, it's not. But from like a talent standpoint, is it? There's a case to be made, right? That maybe it's not from a talent standpoint either.
If we're bringing people from like that are graduates of ITT,
ITT Tech.
Yeah, I think it's the name of the school.
The midday talk show college.
The MIT version of India's MIT.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, we'll take those people, but
they're apparently brilliant when it comes to IT.
If you were a brilliant Indian or any other nationality, excuse me, would you come here first though? Like, this is the other.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
I suspect United States might be top of the list because of the earning potential that you could get over there and businesses that are set up and so forth. I don't know. Canada could be used as a bridge. Maybe.
Yeah, it's too bad. I just want to, before we wrap, I want to say that like we went pretty hard on the immigration thing tonight, and for good reason, I think. But there's a lot of really good people who come from other countries who really want a fair shake in Canada and want to contribute and want to assimilate and do all these great things. I welcome those people, and I encourage more of that. I have some great friends who are immigrants. Len and I are both, sons of immigrant families, and there's so many good things that come from immigration when it's done properly, when it's vetted, when people come here and have to set up shop and contribute and produce and grow, with the country. What we've done is not yielded these results. And this is really where the concerns are for us, not in the people, but rather in the process and the results from those processes, that process. So anyway,
let's wrap it up, Joey.
Let's wrap it up. God bless you.
You know what? It's been a while since we had one of these non-Bitcoin shows, but every once in a while,
since like Christmas. It's been like probably 8 or 9 months. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to cleanse ourselves, and I feel better. It's just Serenity now. So we can move
Great.
forward. Next week, we'll do some Bitcoin stuff again and get back to the regularly scheduled program.
Sure. I can't wait. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We love you guys. We'll see you. Well, Len will see you Wednesday with Jonathan, but we'll be back as always Monday night with more quality Bitcoin content next week, not just notables. Anyway, we'll see you soon.
And don't be a cock.